Hello and welcome to everyone joining us virtually today. Thank you all for being here for what I'm sure is going to be a great conversation. I'm here with my colleague, Stephanie Young, the Executive Director of When We All Vote, and members of the cast of the legendary, multi-Tony Award-winning, and now Emmy Award-winning musical, Hamilton. And we're going to talk about democracy. We're going to get into what is happening in the state of voting, how we can make sure everyone has fair and equitable access to the ballot box, and of course, the importance of civic education, not just for us and not just for eligible voters, but for our future generations as well. So before we dive straight in, I want to introduce each of the panelists, starting with Stephanie Young. Steph is the Executive Director of When We All Vote, a nonpartisan voting initiative created by Michelle Obama. She has more than 15 years of experience as a senior strategic communications, engagement, and content strategist with a proven track record of building strong connections and developing creative solutions for issues involving culture, entertainment, justice, politics, and more. And I can speak to all of these skills because I get the pleasure of working with her every day. Next, we have Ashley De La Rosa. Ashley's a New York native born in Washington Heights. She's an ambassador for Broadway for Racial Justice, a member of the Sunrise Movement, and serves on the Artists Liaison Board of New City Music Theater, among many other endeavors and titles. I'm sure I'm leaving something off of that list. And she currently plays Peggy. So welcome, Ashley. We're also joined by Jared Dixon, who is touring North America right now as Aaron Burr. Jared is also a New York native and has toured in national productions of The Color Purple, The Lion King, where he played Simba, no big deal. And additional credits include In the Heights, Hairspray, The Color Purple, and more. Welcome, Jared. And next we have Crystal Joy Brown, who plays Eliza. I was thinking of opening that by singing it, like in the Skylar Sisters song, but I
was really hoping you would, but continue.
For everyone else's benefit, I chose not to. Crystal is a multi-talented Broadway, TV, and film actress. She currently appears on the hit CB series, The Equalizer. Her Broadway credits include Hair, Leap of Faith, Big Fish, and Motown, where she played the Diana Ross. She's a two-time Fred Astaire Award nominee. And in addition to theatrical pursuits, she holds screenwriting, columnist, and songwriter credits, including original music featured on ABC shows The Neighbors and Mistresses. And I should mention all three of our panelists from Hamilton today are so passionate about social and racial justice and work with Hamilton's Racial Justice Task Force, also known as HAM for Progress, to use the brand and the many talents of the company to push change in our society and to create a more equitable future in Broadway and beyond. So we have some absolute heavy hitters here today, and I'm so humbled just to be sharing a Zoom with you all. I'm Jess Blair. As I mentioned, I work with Steph at When We All Vote. I head up our talent and entertainment partnerships. And welcome, everyone. And I should also say welcome and congrats again on the recent Emmy win. Congrats on Broadway reopening. You guys have been busy, I'm sure. So thank you for taking the time to have this conversation. To set the stage, I'm going to pass it to Steph to give us kind of a high level overview of what is happening with the state of our democracy right now. We've heard about state level bills. There's some federal legislation. What's the latest and greatest? What do we need to know?
Thanks, Jess, and thanks again to the panelists and for this opportunity to talk about this issue, which is so important, which is voting in this country. So we saw a record turnout in 2020, 160 million people have voted. This is the biggest number of folks participating in our electoral process basically ever. And we did this in a global pandemic. At When We All Vote, we were able to help register over 500,000 people, help them go through the voter registration process. And we were able to reach 100 million people. We would not have been able to do that without partners like Hamilton. But now folks saw everybody come out, they saw progress and good things happen. And what happens when that happens in this country is that there's a backlash usually. And now this backlash is targeting voters, mostly voters of color, young people, people with disabilities, working class Americans, people who need greater access and opportunities to making their voices heard. So there have been over 500 voter suppression bills that have been either passed or introduced in state houses all around this country. We're talking about 48 states, so the majority of states, there are people there who are trying to silence voices. Bills have passed in states like Georgia, my home state, Texas, Arizona, and the list goes on, and it's continuing to grow. But I'm here to remind everybody that we shouldn't feel completely defeated. We should feel actually inspired, because people would not be fighting this hard if us using our voices wasn't that powerful. It is powerful. So they're trying to silence us. So there is some, there's some shade here, some shady business going on, but there's also some sunshine with the fact that people are still engaged, involved, and excited about participating in the electoral process.
That's great. Thanks, Steph. It's good to know there's still some optimism to hang on to as well. And also good to know that they're counting tweets. That's a very satisfying piece of knowledge to have. So I have a question for the Hamilton cast now. Very broadly, why are you guys voters? What inspires you to vote? What drives you to stay active in your communities?
I guess I'll start. I think, for one, as a Black male, the history of receiving the privilege to vote later than other demographics, and the history of having to, my ancestors having fought for it, is enough. But on a personal level, I believe in the values of democracy, which is that all people should have a say in how their country is run and the decisions that are being made from the top to the bottom. And I think that voting is extremely important for, for people who don't have the opportunity to affect their local neighborhoods and their states and cities on a broad scale, personally and individually, for them to have an opportunity to affect just everyday things like getting your garbage picked up, or criminal justice reform, or keeping your backyard clean, if that, wherever you're, or keeping computers in schools, funding the arts. If those are things that you care about, then those are things that you need to be voting about and making sure that your politicians are advocating for, because they can just as easily be swept under the rug, as we've seen so many times over and over. So I just would like to be a part of keeping the things that I love a part of this country.
I would say for me, definitely what Jared said about, our ancestors and our grandparents fighting to have a say and a voice in this country is a big motivator for me. But also just the attack on women's rights, the attack on our educational system, the attack on our immigration policies, those things energize me to be engaged. I care about humanity. I care about the the environment. And I see those things on the ballot. Even when I don't find a candidate that I'm like super in love with, I'm looking at their policies. I don't look at the candidate themselves. I look at what they stand for and see if their policies and their practices are in alignment with what I want to see for the future of this country. If they believe in what I believe in and will help forward progress to make sure that this country is more humane, and that we do have the rights and the powers. We see, and I know a lot of people who are Black in their 20s and 30s who don't want to vote and don't want to participate because they don't believe that their vote matters. And I'm like, you see how hard they are working to suppress your voice. That means that there is value in it. And so that's always energizing for me, just to see how hard the other side is working to push people down and make sure that we don't have say about our bodies, about who we choose to love and how we choose to live, and protecting our land and protecting our environment. They're working super hard just as hard, if not harder, than we are working on our side to make sure that people understand that there is so much power in the vote. So that energizes me. And I want to have a country, a world where people feel as though they can prosper, that they have the ability to dream, like to be a child and to be able to dream to be, vice president, president, to be of color and to be like, I can be on Broadway or I can do whatever I want. I can be a dentist, to have that ability and that freedom. And that starts at the ballot box. All of those freedoms and possibilities start there. And also us engaging and knowing what we are voting for, what we are voting against. We have to stay present. It's great that we got a couple of really good wins, but the work is just beginning. Like, it's constant, it's consistent, and we have to watch what everyone's doing so that we can make sure that we are staying in the room where it's happening. Oh, you see how I did that? Yeah. So that's motivation for me.
That was great.
Yeah, I completely agree with Jared and Crystal. And just to add on to that, I also believe that, voting is a right that we all have as citizens here. And it's often been waved around like a privilege for some and for few. And I think that there are people that are discouraged by politics and by the system, and having family members that have had kind of strenuous relationships with the government, being in and out of prison or jail, and that distrust in that government. And I've seen how it's kind of seeped into other decisions that they make involving government. So like right now with vaccines, the same people that were discouraged, that didn't want to participate in voting in my family, were the same people that were like, well, actually, I don't want to get the shot. And so now being able to have these conversations and encourage someone, like my brother, to vote for the very first time, and then to months later encourage him to then get vaccinated and see that trust, that seed of trust, like plant that seed of trust and then watch it grow slowly and slowly over time, and look at someone who is, 43 years old and it just now engaging for the first time in politics and starting to kind of trust this community and government that he's sort of been kind of, thrashed around by. It's really exciting to see someone like that kind of come into their own voice in like a civic duty sense. And that's why I do it. I want to see more people, not just my family, but young voters, older voters, people who haven't voted for the first time, really get engaged and involved and kind of see like, what's your story? Like what's the hesitancy? Why is it there? Because everyone has a reason, and a lot of them are much deeper than we think.
That's so great. And it's really great to hear how energized you guys are and how committed you are to, Crystal, as you said, like continuing the work. The work is just beginning. I wonder if you guys, I was picking up on sort of like a theme of sort of combating that discouragement and the disillusion that people might be feeling after 2020. I mean, not just the massive election we had, which was amazing, like the turnout numbers were incredible, but it was a lot of energy spent on the election. And that, coupled with going through a global pandemic, coupled with just mass information, a lot of human rights crises sprinkled throughout that time, it's understandable that people feel really burnt out. So I wonder what you guys say to people who feel that way and feel very disillusioned by their participation.
I think this sense of relief that a lot of people got to feel from seeing the results of their effort come to fruition on election day is something that we all need to remember. It's being American is a full-time job. It is. We're not a country where our people don't work. We are a working country. And even if you're unemployed, you are working as an American in some facet. You know, you still have the opportunity to go out and vote and to do things to help affect American lifestyle. And I think that that sensation of having combated something is too often an experience that we have as Americans. And I think over time it's not just this generation that's burnt out. I think America in general is burning out. We're tired of the effort that it takes to progress in our country. And I think the more we become confident in our system, and the more the system the more the government allows us to be confident and creates opportunity for us to be confident, it'll be easier to be energized by the idea of having to work as an American by doing things like voting, and making sure that you have the right representatives in every office up and down the ballot. That for too long, it's been the right or the wrong choice. I think I would like my elections to be a little more complicated than just a good versus bad person. I would like to have two good people on both sides who I am actually confused as to who to pick between for once in my lifetime. And I think on both sides, we can attain that. We just have to be a little more particular about who we allow to have power in our country. And voting is an opportunity to educate people, and getting educated on the ballot, who's on your ballot up and down, not just the presidential, but all the way down to your local elections, is an opportunity for people to build that confidence and that trust that Ashley was talking about. And as we evolve as a people, hopefully we'll be more energized about being American and not so burdened.
I love how you said that being an American is a job, because I think about participating in democracy as a practice. I'm a comms professional originally before I took this role as the executive director, and I've written a lot of speeches, and I've always added this line, you know, it is our goal, or we're on a mission to make the promise of America the practice of America. And, you know, we're all in this, like, everybody's, you know, self-healing, everybody's in therapy, everybody is practicing yoga, everybody's practicing something. We have to practice democracy. And that means we have to consistently participate. And I think that we have a culture of tapping in and tapping out. Oh, we like Obama, or we like this, so let's tap in. Okay, we're mad at this, so let's tap back in, but let's tap out, and my job is done. And that is just not how democracy works. It requires the people to participate, and this is supposed to be a government for the people, by the people. And if the people are not paying attention, if the people are not participating, then democracy does not work. And it only works for the few, and the few who participate. And oftentimes those people do not share your values. It's a super complicated issue because we don't have civics taught in our school systems anymore. People literally don't know how the government works. So when you don't understand these things, it's an intimidating process to join. And one of the things that we are trying to do when we all vote is that we really are trying to educate people on what's happening. So you see what's happening in criminal justice reform. Let's break it down on every level to understand how your vote impacts that, right? You see something happening at the border or wherever else. You're angry. All right, let's show you how you can participate in the process to make things better. And I also think that we have to take a step back and we have to breathe and know, like, we do not elect saviors. We elect people that hopefully share our values, that we do have to push for to do the right things, right? Because this is a participatory sport. This is not a spectator sport. And I think as Americans, we've been very, very spoiled because we don't have to think about things like, where's our water coming from? Or, you know, can I eat? Some people do. We know that we have issues like that, but not as dire as other countries, right? You can send your kid to a school. Is it going to be a good school? I don't know, but you can at least send your child to school. So we have been in a situation where we've just been super comfortable and we've kind of tapped out. So now we got to like get our energy back up to figure out how do we consistently tap in. And that's by doing things like this right now. We typically don't have conversations about voting post a major election. We just leave it alone. But it has to be year round. It has to be year round dialogue, year round engagement, year round voter registration, so that people understand and get why they have to participate in the process at every single level, and not just, to Jared's point, at the presidential level, because all of these offices impact us. And I guarantee you, when you are sitting out, there are a ton of people that are going in and they are lobbying and pushing for all the things that they care about, and they are betting on you not to do anything. They are betting on you to stay home and to be discouraged and to say, this process doesn't involve me, doesn't include me, I don't matter. That's how they want you to feel. And I think that it's important to understand voter suppression manifests in two different ways. It's physical, but it's also emotional and mental. And they want you to feel and be discouraged and to feel like there's nothing that you actually can do. And that's just not true. So we get really excited when we're bringing people into the fold and we can empower them, because that's what voting is. It's supposed to empower you, but it's only the first step in your civic engagement roadmap to creating the democracy in the country that you actually want to see.
Something that I've been saying a lot lately, like to that point, is that complacency is dead. I as much as we get burnt out, you can march, protest, and, read the news every day. And sometimes you have to take a seat, understandable. But like our ability to be complacent and just like not pay any attention, or spiritually bypass or be above it, is just, it's over. We have to engage in whatever way we can. And some days we can be on a panel talking about it. And some days we rest and we just hold space for someone else. And some days we uplift. Some days we give money to organizations that are doing the educational work that our system has been, just carving out, because a system that is not educated, a system that does not have the resources to let people really have the power, can really bulldoze over what the people truly need, which is what is happening, right? When you talked about, not teaching civics, I remember loving civics class, and the fact that I know that doesn't exist anymore. I'm from Alexandria, Virginia. I was born and raised on the land of George Washington, where he had his slaves and where they picked cotton and tobacco. And so we were taught a lot of history, and it was just like, it was always embedded in me that I had to continue to do the work, to continue to pay attention, to continue to engage and to vote. But I did vote, but I wasn't voting locally. I was like, yeah, the big ones. I'm not gonna, who cares about mayor or whatever. Like, I just kind of let those things go, because I was like, as long as like the big people are there that I like, the personalities I like are there, or the optics I prefer, then I'm good. But that is so not true. And yes, it can be tedious and it can be exhausting, but it can also just be a day of Googling and then going to the ballot box and and that's it. And it doesn't have to be a constant crusade in your life. It can be something that you, like you said, I love that, like making it a practice, like it's your yoga practice, it's your, it's your diet, whatever. It's just a part of who you are. Like, you engage because we are choosing to be in the society. If you choose to be in the society and participate, we're all helping each other. We walk out the door hoping and believing and having faith that people aren't just gonna, run us over on the road, right? We hope that they are gonna take care of each other, whether that be vaccinated or taking care of, like, going to the polls and making sure that we're fighting for humanity and our environment. But it's still a part of it, right? It's a part of taking care of each other and a part of saying, yes, we're going to choose to be in the society. Therefore, I have to do my part. My part is getting vaccinated and voting and making sure that I know what's happening in my country so that I can have a voice to say something. So many of my ancestors never had the ability to say anything ever about anything. And the fact that I have this privileged position to say something and do something, it's a must for me. And for generations coming up, I want them to see that as a woman, a Black woman, Afro-Latina, like they have the ability to do and say what needs to be said, and they have a right and ability to live the kind of life that they want to live.
I just was going to say, I love that Crystal pointed out that it could be so much easier. And what we're fighting now is people who are making an effort, who are making the opportunity for burnout more possible. I would like to just echo the fact that it could just be a day of Googling, and you could just take a short quiz. You don't even have to talk to anybody unless you really feel like you need to, or you want more education. But it could be as simple as picking your 5 most important priority concerns and figuring out which person who's up for election is in line with those things. It could be as simple as getting your ballot in the mail, looking at the names that are there, and deciding between 1 or 2 people through Google. We're in the age of information, and there are people who are pro-information, and there are people who are against information. And obviously, information creates opportunity for those who can use it properly. And information can be used against people when they don't have information, they make poor decisions or become inactive. And I think that if the American institution is voting, then we should be making the American institution a more easy and simple opportunity for people to use.
I think it's really important to talk about gerrymandering really briefly, because the name is crazy. And I don't think people understand what it is, but it's one of the reasons why we don't see a lot of progress, because it's literally politicians picking their voters. So they will look at a state and they will draw a congressional district that will pack in the voters that are more likely to vote for them. So there are members of Congress who will never be challenged, right? And that goes for both sides, for both parties. And they ensure that they're deadlocked consistently to win over and over again. And then what does that do on the flip side? That discourages people who are in that community and want different leadership, and they can't get it because of the way that it's packed in. That has to end. And also we have to fight against the narrative that providing more access is partisan, because it's not. That is American, right? Not partisan. And one thing I just wanted to mention is that, with everybody kind of being discouraged and feeling discouraged about progress, the Voting Rights Act passed like 56 years ago. So, our parents were around for that, right? Our grandparents faced discrimination. My grandmother was born to sharecroppers in Georgia, and then I ended up working in the White House. So we have made a lot of progress. If we take a beat and look back and say, all right, now, have we sprinted? No, but have we moved forward? Yes. And it is possible to still move forward. We just have to get on the same page again.
That's great. I want to bring up something that I think everyone here has touched on a little bit, and that is civic education and sort of down ballot voting. And I think one of the good things to come out of all of the energy around our latest presidential election was an increase in awareness of how important local politics are, and the things that really affect, like you said, Jared, just the everyday things. And I know this is a priority for Ham for Progress. You guys have made some great educational content about the importance of down ballot issues. At When We All Vote, we have our own civic education program called My School Votes. I'm wondering, what was your guys' experience with voting for down ballot issues, whether it was in the last election or maybe you were ahead of the trend and you've been paying attention to local politics for a while? Did you feel like you had some catching up to do? Was there sort of a knowledge gap? Was it easy or hard for you to access information around that? Tell us a little bit about your experience.
I felt like I definitely had some catching up to do. Although I was born in New York, I did middle school and high school in Florida. And the first time I ever voted was in Florida, and I voted in the last election in Florida. So when Hamilton shut down, I moved back in with my parents for a little bit, and they are in Tampa. And it was, they were having a couple of local legislative races, and they had I think the sheriff was up, that seat was up for reelection, and I was seeing a bunch of like lawn signs. And so I asked my parents, and they were like, oh, we don't know, like we don't really like do that part. And so I made it like an effort to make sure that I requested their ballots, because they didn't know how to do that. And it was also really tough in Florida. They weren't doing the automatic mail ballots. And we sat and we researched all of these people. And I think it was really important for me this last year, because I was doing a lot of marching and protesting and getting really involved, like at work with Hamilton on the task force, and realizing that like I wasn't actually engaging in my community on a local level. So, and also with just everything going on regarding like police brutality and police reform. And I saw that the sheriffs were up for re-election. I was like, okay, like what are these people about? And I mean, it was just two people that like were, because I realized the Florida of it all. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. So you've got someone who's just kind of boldly saying like, I don't believe in any of this stuff. And I don't think, and he was the incumbent, like, so just kind of like, like whatever, and expecting not to have faced sort of any criticism or backlash or anything. And then the person that was challenging him was a bit more moderate, but still like their views were very much like they were kind of swimming in the same direction. And I was like, oh, well, this is why people don't bother, because if you do bother to look people up and you realize like, okay, they're sort of holding hands with one another, how do we get involved and like change the system in that way? And as my parents, it was a really cool activity for us to do together, because I was like, this is like, look at Google. Like my mom's like, who are you? Like, she was like copying on my test or something. And I was like, no, you research these three people. I'll research these three people. We'll talk about it together. We'll see, like, you don't have to vote with who I'm voting for, but like, it was like a book report. Like I was making them do their research, and it made me do my research too. And, but yeah, that was a super late start for me, because I was only ever going in to vote for the president and just being like, all right, peace. Like, I'll see you guys, in another 4 years.
I will say one thing we have at When We All Vote to try to make it easy, because Googling is a lot, is we partner with an organization called Ballot Ready that will give you your entire ballot, and they will you can click on every candidate and read about them on Ballot Ready. So that is one tool that's super amazing, and that we're going to definitely re-partner with them this year coming up. Well, obviously this year there's elections in November, and then next year for the midterms. But I think this is a really good example too about how we make it so complicated, right, to participate, because this information should be made available by the government, really, right? It shouldn't take a non-profit organization pulling this information together and putting it in one place, but it is available. And I just want to throw Ballot Ready out there as you guys are talking about this.
I'm so glad you said that, because even just this last primary we had in New York, I was like, just Googling, and there was I was just looking for a place where all of the information was, where each person had given a statement or, kind of a bio of how they voted or what they believe in or what their platform is or what their website is. And there was just no cohesive place that I could find like easily. So to have that as a resource is so, so important, because yes, you can. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It would maybe take a day Googling, but I have stood at the ballot and had my phone out, because I'm like, am I allowed to have my phone out? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, Googling, like, just to make sure that I'm getting the right person, that they've, have the right policies and practices that I'm interested in. But it is a little bit of work. And I, as you were saying before about these acts, like our job now, like, yes, absolutely getting people out to vote, but also making sure that our task now, I think, is really putting that pressure on our representatives, the tweets, the phone calls, and making sure that this administration is going to preserve and extend the ability for us all to have equality when it comes to voting and accessibility. Like, gerrymandering is one of the most terrifying things to me. And the reason why progress is constantly blocked. And so, like, as much as it is getting and knowing what the ballot is in your neighborhood or where you are, like, the immediate fire is on these acts that are, potentially could change everything and change the game and make it so that people have access and people have the things that they need. And so I think that's just something I wanted to reiterate, because I'm just like, we have to make it easier. Like, the fact that we do have to rely on all these nonprofit organizations to know who our candidates are is crazy. We should have a centralized place where we can get unbiased information that feels like a reliable source as well. And that can be from our government. But we have to apply that pressure.
Oh, sorry. I will say, though, to add, just not to like diminish like researching candidates and stuff, because I know we're talking about like, oh, because it's easy as Googling. But once I learned this time around to like voting locally, like there were people I was like, I've never even heard your name before. And even like voting for the mayor and like realizing like, oh, this is not someone that I think will win, but then seeing their track record and in their community. And like, it's really important that once you vote for someone that you kind of just keep them in the back of your mind, like keep an eye on them and see, even if it's not someone that you did vote for, see like what they do during their time, so that when it does come time to vote again, you're not like, okay, these are all brand new names and people that I know nothing about, because it is really overwhelming, like doing the, Googling the day before or a week before or whatever. And like what Jared was saying, like information is so valuable. And when we feel like we're rushed into making a decision, it's really easy to just be like, okay, this person, yes, I like what they said here in this article, but then not realizing like maybe they had a completely different stance, on something else. And it's just important to like keep your eye on the people that end up winning.
I mean, if I just think of like two of the main things that enslaved people were really like the biggest tools of oppression that were used on enslaved people was lack of education and the inability to vote, right? Like, those are two things that were tenets of slavery. And the fact that it's just these sneaky systems are still creeping in, that's still the same tenets of slavery and oppression being perpetuated today in 2021. And we have to notice that. And so when I hear like my fellow Black and brown people saying like, they don't want to engage or whatever the case may be, or it's too much or it's overwhelming, I'm like, yes, but remember that this is the tool of oppression, is to make sure that you're not educated and to make sure that you don't have a voice.
Yeah, it's definitely a cycle, but they did look at enslaved Africans and say, okay, well, you can be 3/5 of a human being because I want a bigger district and I want more opportunity, have more power politically. And so they used our ancestors in that way. That's where the 3/5 compromise came in, so that folks in Virginia, like Thomas Jefferson and others from Hamilton, had more power. So it really is crazy. Voting was never meant for anybody but white land owning men, period. Okay. So it has evolved over time. And
Protestant.
Yes, and Protestant. That is also true. So, but it's only evolved because people have pushed, right? From suffragists who came in all colors, shapes, and form, to African Americans, to the Latinx community, to even Native American and Asian Americans. Everybody has been a part of the voting rights struggle. That has not been white Protestant land owning men. So I think it's really important to understand the system was never made for us, right? So that's why it takes us to put even more effort to make sure we're a part of it, because they don't want us to be, right? And, unfortunately, our research shows us that people don't look at voting as a responsibility. They look at it as a choice. So it's how are we going to help them make that choice? How are we going to make them create this practice in their life? And it's by doing exactly what you've done, Ashley, with your family and others that aren't interested in the process. Is just talking to them and trying to talk to them without judgment. And I know it's hard sometimes, because I know I definitely judge. We can't be cool. But it's so incredibly important to open up these conversations with people and try to handhold them, and know that it's not going to happen in one conversation. It takes 7 touches to register one voter. So what that means is that you have one conversation, you got to go back, they might start the process, you got to remind them, you got to hit them up again. I mean, it's arduous, but it's worth it. And we can all play our part. And I'll say that the work that you guys are doing with Hamilton, and the fact that you are talking about American history and bringing it to life, and really bringing the foundation and the creation of this country and the purpose of it to life in a way that people can actually understand and is interesting and exciting and entertaining. That's public service right there. So we all can play a role, creatively, in tech, whatever way, we all play a role in making this democracy more equitable.
Well, thank you on that. I think that was a great note to end on. Thank you all for this amazing conversation. I feel like we could have gone on for hours and hours talking about this. So thank you to the cast of Hamilton. We at When We All Vote are so inspired by all that you guys do on and off the stage. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. Make sure you're registered to vote, get involved in local politics, and practice democracy in your community. Thanks, everyone.